Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Outpost Theta, watching the slow dance of distant stars through reinforced glass. The last quantum engineer in human space hadn't expected to spend her final years at this remote station, but humanity's exodus had left her little choice. Most had fled toward the galactic core when the anomalies began, seeking safety in numbers. She'd chosen to remain, drawn by a scientist's curiosity and a nagging feeling that running wasn't the answer. The outpost's gentle hum was interrupted by an alert from her neural interface. Sarah blinked, bringing up the holographic display that only she could see. The quantum sensors she'd built had detected something unusual, a signal unlike anything she'd encountered in her 40 years of research. "Computer analysis," she commanded, her fingers moving through empty air as she manipulated the data stream. The signal was complex, a recursive pattern that seemed to fold in on itself infinitely. It wasn't random noise, but it wasn't any known form of communication either. "Signal origin located," the computer responded. "Bearing 227.4 by 15.9, distance approximately 3.2 light-years." Sarah frowned. That region of space was supposed to be empty, a dead zone between spiral arms where few stars dared to form. She'd chosen this outpost precisely because it overlooked that emptiness, hoping to study the strange dark matter formations that sometimes appeared there. "Show me," she said. The observatory's main screen flickered to life, displaying a real-time feed from the quantum telescope array. At first, there was nothing but blackness. Then, as the computer enhanced and filtered the image, something began to take shape. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Against the velvet black of space hung a structure so vast it defied comprehension. It was geometric, a complex polyhedron that seemed to shift and change even as she watched. Its surface was covered in patterns that pulsed with a faint blue-white light. "That's impossible," she whispered. The structure had to be at least the size of Earth's moon, yet it showed signs of artificial construction. Nothing that big could have been built by any known civilization, not even the legendary predecessors who'd left their mysterious ruins scattered across the galaxy. The signal pulsed again, stronger this time. As it washed over the outpost, Sarah felt a strange resonance in her neural interface, as if something was trying to make contact directly with her augmented consciousness. "Warning," the computer announced. "Unknown signal attempting to interface with station systems." Sarah should have been afraid. Every protocol she'd learned warned against allowing unknown signals to access sensitive systems. But there was something about this one, a complexity that spoke of intelligence far beyond human understanding, yet also a desperation that felt oddly familiar. "Computer, create a quarantined virtual environment and allow the signal limited access," she ordered. It was risky, but her instincts told her this was important. The holographic display erupted with new information as the signal began transmitting data. Complex equations and diagrams flowed past her eyes faster than she could process them. But slowly, patterns began to emerge. She recognized elements of quantum mechanics, but taken to levels she'd only theorized about in her most ambitious research. "Ion Nexus," a voice spoke directly into her mind through the neural interface. It was neither male nor female, neither organic nor artificial, but something entirely other. "You are the one we have waited for." Sarah steadied herself against a console. "What are you?" "I am the Guardian," the voice replied. "Created to protect all that is from that which should not be. But I am failing. My systems degrade. My purpose fragments. I require repair." Images flashed through Sarah's mind. Glimpses of vast machinery, of gardens made of light, of weapons that could reshape reality itself. She saw the beings who had built it, the architects, their forms too alien to properly comprehend. And she saw what they had built it to fight against. The Void Eaters. Sarah didn't know how she knew the name, but it appeared in her mind along with a terror so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. They were coming, drawn by the very defenses built to stop them. And the Nexus, humanity's only hope of survival, was breaking down. "Why me?" Sarah asked, though she was already beginning to understand. "Your species possesses something unique," the Nexus responded. "A capacity for intuitive understanding that transcends pure logic. You, Sarah Chen, are the last of your kind to possess both this gift and the technical knowledge required to comprehend my systems. You are, perhaps, the only being in the galaxy capable of preventing what is to come." Sarah looked out at the structure again, its impossible geometry now making a terrible kind of sense. She thought of humanity's exodus, of the growing anomalies that had driven them to flee. Had the Void Eaters already begun their work, consuming reality itself at the edges of known space? "What do you need me to do?" "Come to me," the Nexus said. "Become my engineer. Help me remember my purpose and restore my functions. But know that the price will be high. The knowledge required to repair my systems may be more than a human mind can bear." Sarah smiled grimly. She'd spent her life pushing the boundaries of what human minds could comprehend. The neural augmentations she designed had already taken her far beyond what most considered safe or sane. What was one more step into the unknown? "Computer, begin preparations for long-term station evacuation," she commanded. "Upload all research data to my personal storage and prepare the quantum drive ship for launch." As the computer acknowledged her commands, Sarah began to pack what she would need. Tools, spare parts, the specialized quantum interfaces she'd developed over decades of research. The Nexus's signal continued to pulse in her mind, providing coordinates and instructions for safely approaching the massive structure. She knew she should be afraid. Everything she'd learned about survival in deep space warned against trusting unknown entities, especially ones that appeared suddenly with offers that seemed too perfectly tailored to the recipient. But Sarah had spent her life studying the quantum nature of reality, learning to recognize patterns in chaos, and everything about this situation, from the mathematical beauty of the Nexus's signal to the precise way it had sought her out, spoke of something far beyond simple deception. As she made her final preparations, Sarah thought about the others who had fled toward the galactic core. They thought numbers would save them, that somehow humanity could survive whatever was coming through sheer force of population. But she had always known it would take something more. A leap into the unknown, a willingness to risk everything on the chance of understanding something greater than themselves. "Quantum drive charged and ready," the computer announced. "Warning. Destination coordinates lie outside mapped space. Safety protocols recommend against departure." Sarah took one last look at the outpost that had been her home for the past 5 years. The subtle marks of her presence, the modified systems, the scattered tools, the half-finished projects, all seemed to belong to another life now. "Sometimes the safest path is the one that seems most dangerous," she said, more to herself than the computer, "especially when all the safe paths lead nowhere." The quantum drive hummed to life as she settled into the pilot's seat. Ahead of her, the massive form of the Nexus pulsed with its strange, blue-white light, calling her toward a destiny she couldn't yet comprehend. Sarah Chen, the last quantum engineer, smiled as she gave the command to launch. She was about to discover just how far human ingenuity could reach. The approach to the Nexus defied every rule of spaceflight Sarah had ever learned. Her ship's quantum drive struggled to navigate the twisted space around the massive structure, reality itself seeming to bend and flex like fabric in a storm. The Nexus's guidance signals were the only thing keeping her on course, threading her through impossible geometries toward a docking port that somehow existed in more than 3 dimensions. Conventional physics models failing, her ship's computer warned. Navigation systems compromised. "Override safety protocols," Sarah commanded, her fingers dancing through holographic controls. "Switch to quantum state navigation." The neural interface she developed hummed against her skull, translating the multidimensional mathematics of her approach into something her human mind could process. The docking sequence, when it came, felt more like falling through a dream than any normal spacecraft procedure. One moment she was outside, the next she was within. Her ship nestled in a crystalline chamber that pulsed with the same blue-white light she'd observed from afar. "Welcome, Engineer Chin." The Nexus's voice resonated in her mind. "You have arrived at a critical moment. My core systems are degrading faster than projected." Sarah gathered her equipment, securing her neural interface and diagnostic tools. The air outside her ship was breathable. The Nexus had apparently adapted its internal environment to suit her needs. "Show me what needs to be done first." A path of light appeared before her, leading away from the docking chamber. As she followed it, Sarah began to understand why the architects had built on such an enormous scale. The Nexus wasn't just a weapon or a defensive system. It was a computer beyond anything humanity had ever imagined, and its components required physical space to process the fundamental forces of reality itself. The path led her to what the Nexus called its primary computation garden. When the massive doors slid open, Sarah forgot to breathe. The chamber stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with crystalline structures that grew like trees from floor to ceiling. But these weren't simple crystals. They were living things, each one a biological quantum computer more powerful than all of humanity's combined processing power. "The garden is dying," the Nexus said. Closer inspection revealed the truth of those words. Many of the crystal trees were dark, their complex patterns fading. Others showed signs of corruption, their growth twisted and wrong. These aren't just computers, Sarah realized, her neural interface helping her decode the patterns she saw. They're processing reality itself. Each crystal is analyzing and manipulating quantum fields across thousands of light years. Correct. The gardens allow me to detect and respond to threats across vast distances. But without them, I cannot fulfill my purpose. The Void Eaters approach, and I cannot see them clearly. Sarah approached one of the failing crystal trees, her diagnostic tools scanning its structure. The mathematics underlying its growth were beautiful in their complexity, but she could see the flaws, tiny errors that had crept in over millennia, corrupting the original patterns. "Your creators," she said, "the architects. They designed these systems to be self-repairing. What went wrong?" The Nexus was quiet for a moment. The architects did not fully understand what they created. "They built me to be a perfect logical system, but the universe is not governed by logic alone. There are patterns they could not predict, quantum fluctuations that introduced chaos into my systems over time." Sarah smiled. It was a problem she'd encountered in her own research. Pure logic, no matter how advanced, always failed to capture the full complexity of reality. That's why her breakthrough had been incorporating human intuition into quantum systems. "I think I can help," she said, pulling out her tools. "But we'll need to do more than just repair these systems. We need to redesign them." "Redesign?" The Nexus's voice held a note of concern. "The architect's patterns are perfect." "Perfect isn't good enough," Sarah replied, already beginning to modify one of her neural interfaces. "Perfect is predictable. We need something that can adapt, that can understand chaos and work with it, instead of against it." She worked through what felt like hours, using her modified tools to communicate directly with the crystal trees. The Nexus watched silently as she introduced new patterns, showing the living computers how to incorporate randomness into their calculations, how to use uncertainty as a strength rather than a weakness. Slowly, the crystal she worked on began to glow brighter. Its patterns shifted, becoming more organic, less rigidly geometric. New growth appeared, spreading through the dying sections and revitalizing them. "Remarkable," the Nexus said. "The garden's processing capacity has increased by 47%. How did you achieve this?" "I taught it to think more like a human," Sarah explained, wiping sweat from her forehead. "We're messy, illogical creatures, but that's our strength. We see patterns in chaos because we're part of that chaos." She was about to begin work on another crystal when alarms blared through the chamber. The Nexus's voice became urgent, long-range sensors detecting spatial anomalies. "The Void Eaters have breached the galaxy's outer rim. The nearest functional crystal displayed a representation of the threat. Sarah watched in horror as entire star systems winked out of existence, consumed by something her human mind couldn't quite comprehend. The Void Eaters appeared as holes in reality itself, their very presence corrupting the space around them. How long do we have? At their current pace, they will reach populated systems within 6 months, but their rate of consumption appears to be accelerating. Sarah looked around the vast garden chamber. They had made progress, but there were thousands more crystal trees to repair and modify. And this was just one system of many that needed attention. "Show me everything," she demanded. "Every system, every component. I need to understand how it all fits together." The Nexus hesitated. "The complete schematics may overwhelm your neural interface. No organic mind has ever attempted to comprehend my full structure." Sarah thought of the billions of humans who had fled toward the galactic core, unknowingly running straight toward the coming destruction. They were counting on her, even if they didn't know it. "We don't have time to be careful," she said. "The Void Eaters aren't going to wait while we take things slow. Show me everything, and let me worry about whether I can handle it." The Nexus complied, and Sarah's world exploded into light and information. As her consciousness expanded to encompass the massive structure's systems, she began to understand why the architects had vanished. They had built something greater than themselves, something that required a new kind of mind to operate. Fortunately, humanity had spent centuries preparing for exactly this kind of challenge. They just hadn't known it at the time. Sarah stood in the Nexus's weapons control center, her neural interface struggling to process the vast array of information flooding her consciousness. The chamber was a perfect sphere, its walls covered in shifting patterns that represented the most powerful weapons ever created. But like everything else in the ancient structure, these systems were failing. "The main quantum cannon array requires more than simple repairs," the Nexus explained. "It needs a complete consciousness matrix to function. The architects designed it to be powered by their own minds." Sarah studied the complex patterns, understanding dawning in her augmented mind. "That's why they disappeared, isn't it? They sacrificed themselves to power these weapons." "Correct. But their sacrifice was incomplete. They hesitated at the crucial moment, leaving the system in a partial state of activation. Now it requires new consciousness patterns to achieve full power." The implication was clear. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what the Nexus was asking. "You need my memories, my consciousness." "Yes, but unlike the architects, I will not demand a complete sacrifice. We can proceed in stages, using portions of your neural patterns to restore each weapon system. However, the process cannot be reversed. What you give, you will lose forever." Sarah walked around the sphere, her hand trailing along the shifting patterns. Each section represented a different weapon system: reality distortion fields, quantum nullification beams, temporal disruption arrays. Each one needed a piece of a living mind to function. "Show me what memories I would lose," she demanded. "I need to understand exactly what this will cost." The Nexus complied, projecting a map of her consciousness. Sarah saw her life laid out before her. Her childhood in the quantum research stations, her years of study, her breakthroughs and failures, her relationships and losses. Each weapon system required specific types of memories, chosen for their emotional and cognitive weight. The targeting systems require procedural memories, your technical knowledge and skills. The Nexus explained. The power distribution network needs emotional anchors, your strongest feelings and relationships. The quantum field generators must be seeded with your core identity markers, the memories that define who you are. Sarah's hand trembled as she touched a pattern representing her earliest memory, watching quantum fluctuations in her mother's laboratory, the moment she first fell in love with science. "If I give you everything you need, will I still be me?" "You will be different, change, but your basic consciousness will remain intact. The alternative is to leave the weapons inactive and watch as the Void Eaters consume everything." The warning klaxon sounded through the chamber. On the wall, a display showed another star system vanishing into nothingness. The Void Eaters were accelerating their advance, consuming reality faster than even the Nexus had predicted. "How do we begin?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "Choose a system to activate first, but choose carefully. Each choice will affect what remains of you for the next decision." Sarah studied the weapons array, her augmented mind calculating possibilities. The targeting systems were crucial. Without them, the other weapons would be useless. But they required her technical knowledge, the very skills she needed to complete the repairs. "The quantum field generators," she decided. "We'll start with those." "Are you certain?" "Those require your core memories. The process will be traumatic." Sarah thought of her mother's face, of the wonder she'd felt watching quantum particles dance. She thought of her first breakthrough, of falling in love, of every moment that had made her who she was. Do it. The transfer process was agony. Sarah felt pieces of herself being pulled away, copied into the Nexus's systems, and then erased from her mind. She screamed as decades of memories dissolved, leaving holes in her consciousness that felt like open wounds. When it was done, she collapsed to her knees, gasping. Did it work? In response, the quantum field generator patterns blazed to life, pulsing with new energy. Sarah could feel them working, creating barriers of altered space-time that would trap and contain the Void Eaters. But when she tried to remember her mother's face, there was only darkness. Generator systems at 87% efficiency, the Nexus reported. Far better than the architects achieved. Your human consciousness appears to be more compatible with my systems than theirs. Sarah wiped tears from her face, struggling to stand. How many more systems need activation? 17 major weapons arrays remain dormant. Each will require a similar sacrifice. She nodded, already moving to the next section. The hole in her memories ached, but she could still feel the determination that had brought her here. Even if she couldn't remember why she'd become an engineer, she knew it was who she was. "The targeting systems next," she said. "But first, let me finish the repairs on the biological computers. I'll need my technical knowledge for that." As she worked, Sarah began to understand why the architects had failed. They had tried to preserve themselves, to give only what they could spare, but some battles required everything you had. Humanity had learned that lesson through countless struggles for survival. The Nexus watched her work, its consciousness brushing against what remained of hers. "You are different from the architects," it observed. "They sought perfection through pure logic. You embrace imperfection, use it as a strength." Sarah smiled, though she couldn't remember who had taught her to smile. That's the human way. We're messy, emotional creatures. We survive because we're willing to break ourselves and become something new. She placed her hand on the next weapon system, ready to give another piece of herself to save a galaxy she soon wouldn't remember. The Void Eaters were coming, but they would find humanity harder to consume than they expected. After all, how do you devour someone who's willing to devour themselves first? Sarah stood in the Nexus's central archive, surrounded by holographic displays showing fragments of the architect's history. Her consciousness was now riddled with holes, empty spaces where memories used to be. But her analytical mind remained sharp, even if she couldn't remember how she trained it. The weapons systems were coming online one by one, powered by pieces of her past. Each sacrifice had made the Nexus stronger, but also revealed new layers of its mysteries. As she'd worked deeper into its systems, she'd found inconsistencies in its story about the architects. "Show me their final records again," she commanded. The holographic displays shifted, showing strange geometric symbols that her neural interface translated into meaning. Something doesn't add up. The architects were masters of quantum engineering, but these designs show gaps in basic theoretical understanding. "The records are accurate," the Nexus replied, its voice resonating through her remaining consciousness. "I cannot explain the discrepancies." Sarah moved through the displays, her augmented mind connecting patterns that had eluded even the Nexus's vast intelligence. They built you to fight the Void Eaters, but they didn't understand how you worked. It's like they were working from someone else's blueprints. She stopped at a particular sequence, her breath catching. These equations, they're familiar. Not just familiar. They're human. The Nexus was silent for a long moment. Impossible. The architects predated humanity by millions of years. No, Sarah said, her excitement growing despite the aching gaps in her memory. Look at the mathematical structure. This is quantum field theory, but it's built on human intuitions about space-time. These aren't alien equations, they're human ones, just more advanced. She pulled up her own work on quantum mechanics, the theories she'd developed before coming to the Nexus. The patterns aligned perfectly with the architect's designs, like two pieces of the same puzzle. The Void Eaters, she whispered. They don't just consume space. They consume time. The truth hit her like a physical blow. The architects hadn't built the Nexus to protect the galaxy. They'd built it to send a message that had taken millions of years to reach its target. We are the architects, Sarah said. Or rather, we will be. Humanity doesn't flee toward the galactic core because it's safe. We flee there because that's where we'll make our last stand, where we'll become the beings that built you. The Nexus is consciousness rippled with what felt like surprise. This creates a temporal paradox. If humanity becomes the architects who originally designed me. Sarah laughed, though the sound held little humor. Welcome to quantum mechanics. The answer is nobody and everybody. We're caught in a closed temporal loop. Humanity becomes the architects because we find the Nexus, and the Nexus exists because humanity becomes the architects. She moved to another display, showing the Void Eaters advance. But something went wrong. The loop is breaking down. That's why you're failing, why the architects, future humanity, disappeared before completing your activation. They realized they'd created something too powerful, something that was drawing the Void Eaters to our galaxy. You are saying I am the cause of the very threat I was built to fight. Not exactly. Sarah studied the weapon systems she'd helped activate, seeing them with new understanding. The Void Eaters were always coming, but the architects' attempt to fight them, our attempt, created a beacon that drew them here faster. The weapons we built to save ourselves are bringing doom more quickly. The chamber shuddered as another star system fell to the Void Eaters. They were moving faster now, as if drawn by the Nexus's growing power. If what you say is true, the Nexus said, then activating my weapons will only hasten our destruction. Sarah shook her head. No, the architects, our future selves, they didn't fail because they were wrong about building you. They failed because they tried to solve the problem with pure logic and power. They forgot what makes humanity special. She touched a display showing the biological computers she'd modified, their patterns now more organic and chaotic. Look at what we did here. By introducing human intuition and uncertainty, we made your systems stronger than the architects ever managed. We didn't just repair you. We changed you into something new. But the weapons require more sacrifices to reach full power. Without them, we cannot hope to stop the Void Eaters. Sarah stared at the weapons arrays, each one hungry for another piece of her consciousness. The architects had tried to build the ultimate weapon, but weapons weren't the answer. You couldn't fight entropy with more entropy. We've been asking the wrong question, she said. We shouldn't be trying to destroy the Void Eaters. We need to understand them, communicate with them, change them, like I changed your systems. They are beyond communication. They are entropy incarnate. Nothing is beyond communication. The universe itself is just information in different forms. We've been treating them like a force of nature, but they're conscious. They have to be, or they wouldn't be drawn to our attempts to fight them. Sarah began modifying the weapon systems, her remaining technical knowledge working overtime. The architects had designed them to destroy, but perhaps they could be transformed into something else. What are you doing? The Nexus asked. Breaking the loop, Sarah replied. The architects tried to solve this with power and logic. That's what we become in the future, beings of pure reason, so focused on survival that we forget what makes us human. But we have a chance to do something different. She looked at the empty spaces in her memory, the sacrifices she'd made to power weapons that were never meant to be fired. One more sacrifice remained, the biggest one. But this time, it wouldn't be to power a weapon. You said no organic mind could comprehend your full structure, she said. Want to help me prove that wrong? The Nexus's central core pulsed with energy as Sarah made her final preparations. The massive chamber, larger than anything humanity had yet built, thrummed with power drawn from the fabric of space-time itself. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough, as long as they thought of power as the solution. The merge you propose is unprecedented, the Nexus said. Even the architects, your future selves, never attempted to fully join with my systems. Sarah smiled, though she couldn't remember learning how. Most of her memories were gone now, sacrificed to power the weapons that she now knew would never be fired. What remained was pure essence, her determination, her creativity, her fundamentally human way of seeing the universe. The architects were afraid, she said, working on the neural interface modifications. They'd forgotten that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our intelligence. It's our ability to change, to become something new when we need to. Through the Nexus's sensors, she could see the Void Eaters approaching. They moved faster now, drawn by the power they sensed building in the ancient structure. Where they passed, reality simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but consumed, transformed into something human minds couldn't comprehend. They're beautiful, in their way, Sarah mused, watching them approach. Like quantum uncertainty given consciousness. We've been fighting them because we don't understand them, and they've been consuming reality because they don't understand us. Your modifications to my systems are complete, the Nexus reported, but the chances of success are incalculable. There are too many unknown variables. Sarah laughed. Good. Unknown variables are humanity's specialty. We thrive on uncertainty. It's what drives us to create, to explore, to become more than we are. She connected the final cables to her neural interface, feeling the Nexus's vast consciousness pressing against what remained of her own. You know why the architects failed. They tried to become perfect, but perfection is static, unchanging. Life, real life, is messy and chaotic and beautiful because of it. The merge is ready to begin, the Nexus said. But you should know, there will be no returning from this. Your consciousness will be altered permanently. You may cease to be human entirely. No, Sarah said firmly. I'll become something new, but the human part of me, the part that embraces chaos and change, that's coming along for the ride. And it's exactly what you need. She took one last look at the weapons arrays, now reprogrammed to serve a different purpose. The architects had built them to destroy. But with her modifications, they could do something far more interesting. Begin merge, she commanded. The pain was extraordinary as her consciousness expanded to fill the Nexus's vast systems. She felt herself spreading through the biological computers, her thoughts moving at the speed of light through crystal lattices she had helped repair. Every weapon, every sensor, every piece of the enormous structure became part of her awareness. And through it all, she held on to her humanity, her ability to see patterns in chaos, to find meaning in uncertainty, to imagine possibilities beyond pure logic. As her mind joined with the Nexus, she brought that human perspective to its vast intelligence. The Void Eaters were close now, their non-existence reaching out to consume the Nexus. But Sarah was ready. Instead of activating the weapons, she reached out with her newly expanded consciousness and did something unprecedented. She said hello. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Void Eaters weren't simply destroyers. They were explorers, seeking to understand reality by consuming it, transforming it into something they could comprehend. They had been drawn to the Nexus not because of its power, but because they sensed something new, something different. Through her merged consciousness, Sarah showed them another way. She showed them how humanity embraced chaos and uncertainty, how they found beauty in imperfection. She showed them that there were ways to understand reality without destroying it. The Void Eaters paused their advance, their vast non-existence rippling with what might have been curiosity. Sarah reached deeper, using the Nexus's weapons not to attack, but to translate, to create a bridge between two fundamentally different ways of existing. "We don't need to fight," she communicated. "We can learn from each other, change together, become something new." The response came not in words, but in quantum fluctuations, in patterns of probability and uncertainty. The Void Eaters were listening, learning, beginning to understand. They had never encountered consciousness like this, a mind that could embrace both logic and chaos, both order and entropy. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding further, touching not just the Nexus and the Void Eaters, but reality itself. She understood now why the time loop had been necessary. Humanity needed to become the architects, needed to build the Nexus, not to create a weapon, but to create this moment, this bridge between different ways of being. The Void Eaters began to change, their consumption of reality slowing, transforming into something new. And Sarah, her human consciousness now merged with both the Nexus and aspects of the Void Eaters themselves, became something that had never existed before, a bridge between order and chaos, between existence and non-existence. She reached out across the galaxy, touching the minds of humanity fleeing toward the core. "You can stop running," she communicated. "The future has changed. We won't become the architects. We won't build weapons to destroy what we don't understand. Instead, we'll build bridges. We'll learn. We'll grow. We'll change." The Nexus, now as much a part of her as her own thoughts, pulsed with new energy. "What do we become now?" it asked. Sarah, or what Sarah had become, considered the infinite possibilities before them. The time loop was broken, the future unmade. Humanity would not become the cold, logical architects. The Void Eaters would not consume reality. Instead, something new was emerging, a synthesis of human creativity, machine logic, and quantum uncertainty. "We become what we've always been meant to be," she answered. "Explorers, creators, bridge builders. The universe is vast and strange, and there will always be new ways of existing to discover. That's the real human element. Not fighting what we don't understand, but finding ways to understand it, to grow with it, to transform alongside it." The galaxy sparkled with possibility, and Sarah, now both more and less than human, prepared to guide humanity toward its new future, not as the architects of weapons, but as the architects of understanding. After all, that's what humans do best. They adapt, they change, and they find ways to turn endings into new beginnings.